www.typefrag.com.
A nerd is someone whose life is focused on computers and technology. But a geek is someone whose life is focused on computers and technology and likes it that way.
You're listening to TSN, the Team Sportscast Network.
Okay.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special news bulletin. The Japanese have attacked Pearl Harbor, Hawaii by air. President Roosevelt has just announced.
Since the beta, people started using demo rushes and grenadiers and half tracks, and it seems to be pretty effective as a diversion.
Deutschland von 1 hat 3/4 die Waffen niedergelegt. Ich habe grundsätzlich immer erfüllt.
Mirror matches are a tricky thing. Lots of people do want the mirror matches, but there's their balance problems, you know? I mean, one of the things that I like to talk about...
We shall fight in France. We shall fight on the seas and oceans. We shall fight with growing confidence and growing strength in the air. We shall defend our island.
This is Bridge 1 to TSN Central. Tales of Heroes is a go. Repeat, Tales of Heroes is a go.
Yes, Bridger here with Tales of Heroes. Dig that music. Welcome to the Team Sportscast Network this lovely Sunday evening. It is Tales of Heroes, your weekly rundown on Company of Heroes, basically. This is your weekly community show. We talk about all the different news of the week. We give you some tips on strategies and talk about a specific unit every week. At the end, that's the third segment of the show. This week, it's machine gunners. That's what we'll be talking about in the third segment of the show. And we'll be talking about the news in just a couple minutes. And then the second segment, the big segment, is map rundowns. We are talking maps and different strategies on how to use different maps, whether there's balance issues, that kind of a thing. It's a special video broadcast this week. Special video broadcast, basically. We'll be, making this. Normally, it's just an audio version of this particular podcast. We have, a discussion, a talk show. But today, we have a special video production of it because we'll be talking about the maps. So when we get to that portion, you can click onto the video stream of Stream 1, and you'll be able to watch us, look through the different maps and see the different things we're talking about on the video. So with that, I will introduce my co-host. I am Bridger. Joining me for this show, number 5, Tales of Heroes, week number 5, is Vittensby. Welcome to the program, sir.
Hey, Bridger, always great to be here. I'm really excited about this week's match as it's on Lyon, which is a map that most players haven't experienced yet, so they'll get a good lesson between two top players on that one, as well as pretty excited about the video portion of the maps. Got a lot to talk about. Should be a great show. Absolutely. I almost forgot to mention that after of course the talk show, the program here, we will be going on to the video replay review of the week, which is Cepha versus Fujix on Lyon, as you said. It's one of the maps that's not a standard rotation for ranked maps in Company of Heroes, and we're going to see exactly what a high-level players do to it. The reason, I think, is that it's huge. I mean, the map is a 2v2 map with 1v1 setup, so we'll see how it plays out. So let's go through the news. This week there was some interesting things, and I had to pull up over here somewhere. Yes, Planet Company of Heroes had an interesting rundown of the Company of Heroes, where it places in the sales charts. And for the fourth week in a row, I think, or something to that effect, Company of Heroes has been the best-selling game overall. This is combining the DVD sales with the CD sales. That's important, and the collector's edition, because separately, I believe the DVD-ROM is the best-selling one. It only comes to like 3 or 2 in the rankings for the most part. But if you collectively add all of them together, Company of Heroes as a game sells better than everything else in September. It beat out World of Warcraft, The Sims 2, Civilization 4, Age of Empires 3, which were a lot of the other big ones in September. It also won specifically September 25th through October 1st. So that's a big bit of information there, and it's really great to hear that it's selling so well. I think all the amazing reviews coming out everywhere for it can't hurt. We did this on like the first show. Or the second show. I'm going to go to GameRankings.com and find out exactly what the
ranking on Company of Heroes is. Because I am thinking it's going to be in the 90s, 90%, 94% average ratio. That is exceedingly high. For PC 2006 releases, it's the #1 PC release this year. It's actually, can that be right? Is it the #1 2006 release? I'm going to do the rankings here and check this out, because this is actually a really great site. But if we drop this down, all games for 2006. Let me load it up. It's taken a while. Resident Evil 4 comes out. That's the only one that beats it. Is Resident Evil 4 in the last 12 months I did. For 2006, Company of Heroes is the highest rated game for 2006. In the last 12 months, since last October, Resident Evil 4 is the only one that beat it out. I guess Resident Evil 4 for the PS2 that came out last probably October or November or December. That's the only thing that beat Company of Heroes in terms of average rating of reviews. So, I mean, wow, this game is absolutely doing fantastic. Back to Company of Heroes, Planet Company of Heroes. There's some other things I think on here. There's an interview. Wasn't that much other huge news this week. Vittensby, can you think of anything specific that you wanted to bring up?
None in particular, but I just want to say that I'm really enthusiastic that the community is only going to grow. It's certainly great for a game to get excellent reviews, but it really comes down to players' word of mouth, I think, after the initial release. And this game, as far as I know, everyone's pretty much raving about it. So I'm just really happy that that's going to be the case, and I look forward to even more tournaments. I know there's a few tournaments that started, but the big-time tournaments did their first run on, Saturday, I believe, Saturday morning. So hopefully there'll be more tournaments, and this game will pick up and be, just as popular as maybe even StarCraft.
Yeah, we can only dream, right? Actually, there is one more thing I forgot to mention. The Cal League, the Cyber Athlete Amateur League, has added Company of Heroes as a game. They are right now organizing the rules and how they're going to format the league, and to that effect, I highly recommend you go over to CALEAGUE. It's caleague.com, basically, caleague.com for Cyber Athlete Amateur League. It's a very prestigious league in the world of online video gaming, mostly first-person shooters in the past. They've been adding RTSs recently, so that's good to see. So it's a very, very big step for Company of Heroes, I think. Also, one more thing I forgot to mention is there is a new patch supposedly coming in the next 2 to 3 weeks. And, it's basically they have the changes pretty much locked down. They're in Q&A right now to make sure that there's no bugs in it. So that's really cool to see. Obviously, that timetable is subject to change based on, if they find any major show-stopping bugs in it, they're going to have to take it back out and then run it through QA again and again. That's how it works, basically, is you got to understand the way that these patches are tested. They are run through a QA cycle, which means they get thrown into, a big room with tons of beta testers, and they, try and break the game, find any bugs, just play it in every manageable way on every manageable computer to find out if any of the changes they made in the patch have broken something. So it's not just balance testing, it's also finding any kind of major bugs that are involved. And if you find one, you have to go back and patch it. Even if it's the tiniest little piece of code that you have to go back and change, you have to go through the entire process again. So it may take a day or a day and a half or 2 days. I don't know how long they take to go through the QA process, but sometimes it takes a week or more. So if they find a bug, they have to go back through that entire week again to double check and make sure it's working. So, just keep that in mind, but it's definitely coming. So that's good to hear. I expect it within at least a month. We'll have a brand new patch, and it'll probably change some balance. They said it changes lots of things, balance stuff, bug fixes, single-player fixes, things like that. So good to hear, and I think that's pretty much it for the news this day. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention special thanks to Mora and BC Corn, who were in Channel Sword a few days ago, and listening to the players, and they couldn't really express their concerns, but they were certainly listening and giving us a little bit of feedback about what our concerns were about balance. And I know I had posted on GameReplays.org about 15 different bugs that me and a few friends had found. So hopefully, if they're listening to this and they haven't seen that thread yet, they can go check that out. It's been pinned in the general discussion, and that should help them fix. Just put it on paper to see, and hopefully it'll help them fix all the different bugs that have been discovered.
Alrighty, so let us move on to this day in history. It's actually, I'm going to do this week in history. I'm just going to find the coolest World War II fact from the week past. So last Friday, October 13th, 1943, Italy declares war on Germany. Basically, for those of you that aren't up on your World War II history, the way this worked is Italy, of course, was. A lot of people are going, what? I thought Italy and Germany were together. They were. Italy and Germany were allies. Mussolini and Hitler had signed an alliance, a mutual defense alliance, and they were working together at the beginning of the war from 1939, but Mussolini's power base was not completely secure. And when the Allies started invading Italy, I think it was 1942, might have been 1941, but I think it was 1942, the Americans and the British, I believe, started invading Italy. And in the process of invading Italy, they fought a lot of Italian soldiers. There was also some German garrisons there, but Mussolini was overthrown and I think executed by Italians who decided they had enough of this fascist leader. And when he was overturned, Italy sort of joined the Allies and declared war on Germany, which is what happened on October 13th, 1943. So there you go. And at this point, Germany basically said, okay, you know what? If you're not with us, you're against us, and basically declared war back on Italy and started to creep down from Germany with its garrisons that were already there and sent some more troops to try and take Italy back and force it to be under German control. And so there was a big thing going on, and a lot of people don't understand how important it was that Italy was as a battleground, because the landings on D-Day in 1944 might have gone a lot harder if Germany hadn't had to spend a lot of resources fighting for Italy. The Allies, lost a lot of good men in Italy because it's such easily defensible territory. It's mountainous. It's very hard to move troops through. It's not a good place to attack. Extremely good place to defend. So Germany had a field day, trying to, killing a lot of allies in Italy, throughout the Italian campaign. But it did take away some power from defending France and from attacking the Russians. So that was a very important campaign overall, even though the Allies didn't necessarily take Italy until D-Day had happened, and it was still very important, especially because of this. They got Italy to overthrow Mussolini. So that's the end of that. That's this day in this week in history. Now, let me do a quick rant. We're gonna have to rant here, and because I am tired. I am tired of going on the Relic News forums or any forums and see somebody go, how do I beat Rifleman? I don't understand how to beat Rifle Spam. Or how do I beat Calibes? Or I'm having a problem, the Stug comes out too fast. And the only response that is given by the wise forum goers, these trolls that are just on the forums 24/7 because they have no life, the only response given is, well, clearly you lost because you didn't have enough fuel. I mean, you didn't control the fuel, so you lose the game. Duh. I mean, there's your counter right there. Just get the fuel. And it completely bypasses the point. It has nothing to do with fuel. The guy is asking, how do I beat a specific strategy? What combination of units, what kind of tactic should I use to beat this specific tactic or strategy? And they respond by, well, you gotta try and beat the strategy by winning the game. I mean, that's exactly what they're saying. Of course you have to get the fuel. That's a no-brainer. The entire game is about controlling resources. That's not what he's asking. He's not asking how to win the game. He's asking, how do I beat, Rifleman with grenades? How do I beat an early Stug? Things like that. You cannot always have every fuel point in the game. So, controlling every fuel point in the game is not an option, especially on maps like Angoville. You can't control both high fuel points. It's just they're too far apart. If you're facing a competent opponent, he's not going to let you control both, because if you put your forces on one side, he's going to attack the other. If you go to defend that one, he's going to put it. So literally, you are trying to answer his question in a situation where fuel is equally distributed. That is your goal. So from now on, if you have a response and you're about to type, you're an idiot, you shouldn't let them take the fuel point, then stop and consider how to beat the strategy, assuming both sides have equal fuel. That's what he wants to know. That is a constructive response. Okay, that's enough of that. We'll jump right into this. So if you are not already on the video, stream. Or if you are listening to this audio podcast and you want to see the map rundowns we go through here in just a minute, you can switch over and download the video podcast, or you can switch over to the video stream right now. I've put the video inside the video podcast stream, the video podcast feed, so you will not be able to get this video if you are downloading only the audio on the tales.tsncentral.com site. That's tales.tsncentral.com, tales.tsncentral.com. So if you are listening to the audio before, right, well, in the future from when I'm talking right now, then you want to grab the video stream. And the video stream is up. So if you are currently listening, go ahead and go to tsncentral.com and open up the Play Center and open up the video stream because, well, it's just plain awesome. And I'm going to turn that on right now so I don't forget, because sometimes I'll be trying to run a video and then I'll forget that it's on. We're going to open up Angoville first and start up the game. And Vittensby, let's talk Angoville. This is actually one of my favorite 1-versus-1 maps. From an overall perspective, what are the tactics here? I mean, it's varied because you have one side that's an urban environment and one side that's, open plains.
Well, certainly the left side of the map, as we had mentioned before last time when we broadcasted Angoville, the left side certainly favors early rifle spam with allies, and the right side tends to favor Axis. However, I kind of encountered an interesting strategy today, and the gentleman went for the left side. He took the strategic point right below the victory point, built a bunker right there as soon as possible, and that bunker right below the victory point will cover the strategic point and the Allies' fuel on the left side. And if you can get that up, which most Allied players will think, oh, well, Axis is going to go for the right, so we better send our first squad to the right, it kind of throws you off. Although you sacrifice control of the right, you will effectively gain control of the left and then can deal with the right a little bit later. Another strategy you can kind of use is go 2 Volks, then an MG, and attack depending on how that first initial combat goes, you can attack the Allies' strategic point right outside their base on the left side, put a bunker there, hold off, while you're building the bunker, you can put an MG down and leave your 2 Volks in heavy cover around there. If you can hold off the Allies and get that bunker up, that's pretty much a game winner in about 6 or 8 minutes. A lot of this map comes down to the first engagement and who kind of comes out ahead. So I know a lot of people like this map, but I think if you want like a great 1v1 match, I think Semois is still the map to go.
I completely disagree, later. But that's... I hate Semois. I think it's far too much of a slippery slope map, and I think actually I like the fuel distribution on it. That's the only thing I really like on Semois, because I like the fact that that's actually not a slippery slope mechanic, but so I'll take that back a little bit. I like the fact that we'll talk about Semois, but I think let's look at this point. You have a high fuel point here and a high fuel point here, which means that if you start losing map control, the only point you're going to have as far as fuel is concerned is this low fuel point here. So if you are in a position where you start to lose, you will, lose both of these fuel points at some point, even if it's just a temporary thing and you try to start to come back, that's a huge blow. That's a 16 fuel point that could be lost. Or, you could lose an observation post on it. And it's very difficult to hold both of them at the same time. But, if you're beating down your opponent, you get a slight advantage. For instance, if you get a Puma or a Stug out, you can force him back to his base and take both fuel points, and from there it only gets easier because you have both fuel points. So, on this map, skipping up and teching up as soon as you can to get some kind of overwhelming firepower in order to use to take out the fuel, or to take out the defense around these fuel points is essential, in my opinion. So tech up as fast as you humanly can to get some kind of overwhelming power that will allow you to hold both fuel points, even if you can hold them just for 30 or 40 seconds, because if you can start holding them, chances are you're going to continue holding them because you'll be continuing able to pump out Pumas or tech up to the next level or go Stugs or what have you, and your opponent will be severely hindered because he lost a lot of fuel. Compare and contrast that to Semois, where both players have a plus 10 fuel point next to their base, and the only things up for grabs on the map are plus 5 fuel points. So if you lose control of the map, you still don't have that huge of a disadvantage. He may have about twice as much fuel as you. If you lose control on the map of this game, shit, I mean, 16, 22, 32, so plus 32 plus 5, you got 37 versus 5. He's got something like on the order of 7 times as much fuel income if you lose control of the map. Whereas on Semois, he's got twice as much fuel income. So it makes for a lot better of a comeback map in that sense, I think.
Well, actually, in my experience, I'll stand by what I said and reinforce it. In my experience, I can get total map control on this map within 8 minutes or 10 minutes at most. That first engagement is critical. If you beat access to that building by their strategic point and they're running up an MG, then they have to basically scurry for the left. Then you send your, it's just counter, counter, counter. Whoever wins the first engagement is going to pretty much win on this map. Whereas Semois, you do have that fuel that's right next to your base, so that will keep you in the game. And it's not so much based on that first engagement as this map is. That's why I think on this map it's actually better to start out with a squad of Volks and go either exclusively for the left or exclusively for the right, because allies tend to cap the right and left strategic point with an engineer squad and then send their rifleman squad to one of the sides. And if you have 2 pioneers and a Volk squad on one side, you should be able to overcome that. So it all kind of comes down to that first engagement: who wins, who gets pushed back to their base because they have to reinforce. And that's just my experience with it. You can still have good games on it, but I think that the fact that fuel is right next to your base in Semois kind of keeps you in the game a little bit longer.
Yeah, I personally would switch the fuel points around. So the plus 16s should be right next to the base, because even though they're right next to the base, they're still very harassable. I mean, I get harassed a lot of the times. If you're concentrating fully on the right-hand side as Axis, they can easily swing a guy down and harass this point down here. Now, that's probably because it's a low fuel point, so it can really go down very quickly. But I would definitely switch the high fuel point that's in the middle here and the low fuel point that's here and mirror that on the other side, so that you're fighting for low fuel points in the middle, and if you lose map control, you still have a 16 fuel point next to your base. Now, you're going to lose the plus 5s in the middle, so that's going to give him an extra 10 fuel over you. So he'll have something on the order of, let me see, 16 plus 10 would be 26. If he has 26 and you just have this one down here that's plus 16, he'll have an extra 10. It's not quite twice, but maybe if he puts an OP and you put an OP, it's much more comparable to Semois. So I think that's what they need to do to balance this map and really make it a good tournament map. Because right now, as you said, it's whoever wins the first couple engagements and gets the right counters out, they can start taking map control. And when they start taking map control, it's a lot easier to hold map control.
Well, I would have to definitely disagree to put a 16 fuel point right next to your base. I mean, that gives you absolutely no incentive to go after the map. And
okay, maybe switch it around then. Change them both to medium then. Change all the points in the map from high points to medium points. Maybe that'll make it better. I hate having all the big fuel right here in the middle and having nothing, next to nothing, easily defendable, because that means as soon as somebody starts losing, they're going to continue to lose.
Very true. Yeah, I definitely don't like the 16 fuel right next to your base. You put an early OP, and within 5 minutes you got Pumas on the field. So definitely that would be a no-no for me. But I think the map is fairly balanced. But I was talking to Fujix right before the show, and he said that it tends to favor allies a little bit, with riflemen having sort of an early advantage against Volks Grenadiers. It's a little bit easier to fight at close range than Volks, which get benefit at long range. But I still think it's a pretty balanced map, and it makes for interesting games as long as that first engagement goes kind of even. Otherwise, 10 minutes later, you're already in another game because the guy resigns when you totally take map control.
Yep, all right, moving on to Lyon now. We don't want to take too much time. That was a little bit longer than I'd hoped. But moving on to Lyon, this is a map that we're going to be showcasing for tonight's show, actually, for tonight's match, Cefa versus Fujix. And this is a very interesting map because it's ginormous for a 1v1 map, and it's not included in the tournament rotation. So that's a couple of things that make it stand out. Another thing that makes it stand out is that I've never actually freaking played it, so we're going to be talking kind of our ass on this one. I hate to tell you. Let's open up the strategic map here and look at it. The way it's set up is, of course, allies are set up at the top here, and the axis are set up over on the side here. For those of you that haven't played it, I think this is one of the maps that if anybody hasn't played, it's probably this one. And, it's interesting because there's a lot of debate before the game came out, when we got a screenshot of this map, I remember there was a huge debate on GameReplays.org. The forums, they were like, "Oh man, this map, completely favors the Allies or something. I mean, look, the +5 fuel over here on this island. Look at how much more fuel they have and things." And then people kind of considered, oh well, it's about the same distance from Allied base to this +5 fuel as it is to Axis, but Axis can get here in fewer jumps. 1, 2, 3, 4 jumps versus the Allies is 1. Let me see if 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 jumps, I think, is how it works, because they have to go through this section here. They can't go across here. So, it's a very interesting map. I haven't actually played it myself, just because I usually, when I play 1v1s, I'm playing ranked. So that's why I haven't played it. But we'll watch it tonight and see how it unfolds. But as it is such a huge map for a 1v1, I'm thinking rifle spam is going to win the day early in the game, because they're much more mobile than any kind of other units, and with their grenades and with all kinds of extra enhancements, they are going to be exceedingly powerful to just spam all over this map because it's so huge. However, as soon as you hit vehicles, they're going to take over because it's so huge. Vehicles with their speed are going to be indispensable. Tanks especially, because of so many buildings on the map. So we'll see if that comes down. I don't really have much to say about it because, like I said, I haven't played it yet. So Vitnessby, any thoughts? Have you played this map?
I've played on it once, and I watched a few replays today just to get prepared for the show. Basically, kind of the general strategy is Axis will barbed wire the north bridge, maybe even tank trap it a few minutes later. Allies will get to the center first, put some barbed wire there. It's kind of a camp map. It's kind of a camp map. There's one building on kind of the Axis side, as well as the Allies side on each part of the bridge that covers the bridge with an early machine gun. So you could argue that it might favor Axis a little bit, but definitely with the added mobility that riflemen have, it certainly might give an advantage to the Allies. Certainly Fujix thought it for some reason, he didn't elaborate, but that it was an Allies-friendly map. It's interesting that there's there's 3 victory points, and that you're basically fighting over the middle victory point. It is a camp fest, and it is one of those maps that you don't fight too much for early map control. Basically, you just kind of want to sit back and quick tech to tanks. And in the match today, you're going to see huge tank battles with like 20 or 30 tanks on the field.
Wow.
So if you like tanks, you're definitely going to like this match. I mean, we're talking about smoke going off and Tiger Aces, like 15 Stugs, so still stay tuned. At least that's what I hear is in the match, so don't quote me on that. I haven't seen it. I refuse to watch it. But yeah, Lyon is just way too big, in my opinion, to be tournament worthy.
I really like the layout. I just wish they had a 2 versus 2 version. I think that would make it really nice.
With the Allies starting in the right and their other allies starting in the left, or something like that.
Well, there's a strategic point right down here where the Axis could start in that strategic area down there. You could change the medium munitions point on the top to an Axis starting location, maybe.
That would definitely be interesting. I wouldn't mind seeing
just move the munitions point, obviously, a little bit to the left or right or whatever, in order to make it balance. But one other really interesting factor of this map is there are 2 low munitions points, 2 +5 munitions points that are inaccessible until you get vehicles. That's right. There is no way to get this point right here up until you get vehicles to bust down these gates. And then on the Axis side as well, there's another point right here that has inaccessibility to vehicles. You can find that in the southern center of the map, just north of the southern victory point. It's actually really kind of cool. It's kind of a cool addition. There's a couple of munitions points you can't get to until you get tanks to bust through the gates. But just thought I'd point that out.
Yeah, and you can also blow up the bridges in this one too. I'm pretty sure that the center bridge cannot be blown up because there's a victory point on it. But
no, it cannot be blown up. You're right. But the other 2, that does add a little, some cool bonuses to the way the game plays.
Yep, you can set a demolition charge on that bridge, and if you see something going across, just hit the button and it'll go. I don't know if demolition charges should be the way that... I don't want to get into balance talk, but maybe demo charges shouldn't necessarily be the way they are now, where you can just set it up, retreat, and then it's kind of like the Goliath. You got like a remote control coming from your base like 6 miles away to explode it. But it's probably fine the way it is. I just have a pet peeve with Goliaths and demolition charges for that reason, especially on bridge maps. I think it kind of favors the Allies, although Axis can bring a Goliath and surprise you on a bridge just as easily. So maybe it's balanced, but that's just my thoughts.
Alrighty, on to Semois. Excuse me. We are talking about the beta map, and what Vittensby considers a really good. Actually, I consider it a really good map as well. I think it's laid out very well. It just, it has a tendency to have a lot of choke points, which I don't really like the way that it's set up in that fashion, but it's still a very good 1v1 map, and I think it's a better layout of resources like we were talking about, because you can see the +10 right next to each base allows for the continuation of fighting even if you lose the middle portion of the map, because there's only +5s in the middle, and they're very widely spread, so it's easy for one side to hold one +5 and another side to hold another +5. So that makes the fighting on this map really, really well done, and there's a lot of comeback possibilities. The main fighting revolves around the high munitions points, both at the north section and the south section of the map, and as well as the strategic points that are right next to them, because those strategic points provide access to the fuel points and that whole section of the map. There's also, of course, heavy fighting over the middle, the urban center of the map. We'll take a look at that right now. You have, of course, the church, and there's the rest of the map. Actually, here's what I'm going to do to make this a little bit lighter. I'll quit and view the battlefield. There we go. Now I can see everything. Excellent. So, you have the church in the middle as a very coveted position. Snipers. I love the cool detail in this game, whereas if you put machine guns in the church, these windows on the side will open up and they can shoot from there, and there's a window over here that they'll shoot out of. But if you put a sniper in the church, he actually gets in the steeple and shoots from the steeple. I mean, the detail of that is really cool.
It's great to have a lot of fuel right next to your base, but if you lose too much map control early on, Allies can just set up a few easy tank traps. There's 3 points on each side of the map, on the Axis side and on the Allies side, and they're pretty small points, to be honest, and just a few tank traps can completely lock your opponent on his side of the map, as long as you get
especially as Axis, like you said. I mean, there's no way for Axis to get through tank traps, no easy way, without sitting there blasting away at them. And there's one thing that we should point out that a lot of people don't know, and I actually didn't know for a while. I'm going to open up the tactical map to show this. A lot of people can see the easy way to get the Axis stuck on their side. I don't know why I have this backwards. The CPU is on the wrong side. I think I randomized start locations. But the Allies are normally on the south. And this bridge here is the easiest one, right next to their base. And then the island bridge is another one. You can put some tank traps there. And lastly, the little the ford down at the bottom is the last one that you can put, some tank traps across. Those are the 3 points that the Allies can be forced into their side of the map. But a lot of people don't know that on the Axis side, you have the bridge right here. And you also have the road right here, but this whole section of the hedges is actually a hill that infantry and vehicles cannot climb down. So you have the road area, and you have this little section up here that actually acts as a ramp that units can go down. So there are 3 locations. This area right here for the Axis, that's one area they can get through, but notice there is a hill here. You cannot pass along this hill in this direction. It is too steep, so your units cannot pass it. However, here is another, the third location. So you've got one up here, another one down here, and then, of course, the bridge way over here. And I'll show you the Allies ones as well. You got that, you've got this, and you've got their main base. So, actually it's a little bit more balanced than I had originally thought, because when you look in the tactical map, you go, whoa, look at all this room that the Axis has versus the 3, tiny choke points, but actually it is choke points for the Axis up here. So, any tips for playing this map? What do you fight over first? The munitions points? Do you fight over the victory points? I think my consideration would be hold one of these sides, either the north or the south. You don't have to hold the middle, but make sure you control one of the sides so that you can always get reinforcements to wherever you need to go.
Well, the map usually ends up polarized. Sometimes it ends up kind of strange, but usually it's polarized with the Axis controlling the east and Allies controlling the west. You can fight over the high munitions points, or you can go for that and you can try to get one of those immediately, or you can try to get a little bit extra fuel with the +5 and just cap the 2 strategic points that are straight to that fuel. Normally it's better just to fight over the high munitions points rather than just a measly +5 fuel, but if you can control that +5 fuel for just a few minutes early in the game, it should give you a little bit of advantage against your opponent. People like to build a lot of barbed wire on those bridges in the south. That's a little strategy you can use on the southeastern portion of the map. I think it's definitely, if you want to talk balance, it's pretty balanced for either side. I mean, if you want to talk about a balance problem, we're going to go to Sturzdorf next, and that's really where I think we'll have a lot to say about why it's imbalanced. I tried to tell Mora about why it was imbalanced, and I had to have TGE come on to kind of like support me because I just wasn't explaining myself as well as I would have liked to. But Semois is a good map, and you can fight over the munitions points, and since the fuel's so close to your base, that's pretty much what happens every game. But don't discount the center. It can be a good tool to forcing either side to kind of pick a particular route. Mines are also great on that map.
I think another interesting thing is we can point out that on the Axis side, if you want to put a machine gunner anywhere, this building is a great one because it looks right over their main road out of their base. So you basically shut down that main road. They can kind of slide in over here and go for the north point, but if you barbed wire that, actually you can't because of the bunker there, but you can still make sure that they can't come through the middle at all if you put a machine gunner here. If you're on the Allied side, you could put one in the church. A lot of people do that, but I recommend this building up at the north here because it overlooks the middle victory point, it overlooks the attack from this route, and it overlooks the attack from this road up here. It forces the Axis to watch out. Now this map I have actually made a lot more forward HQs on this map than I have on almost any other because it is a very urban map, and because of the way the choke points are made, you would really like to have an HQ close to your side. For example, the Axis side normally starts up here, and I see a lot of Axis players, at least I do this, put a forward HQ here to reinforce my unit so I can attack the middle from the north, where it's a lot more open and I have a lot more channels to attack from than from my base, where I'm pretty much limited to this one bridge. So that's a very popular choice for both players, is to attack opposite from their base. So you control this side of the map, and the Allies attack in this direction and attack from this side of the map. It's a lot more difficult to attack, I think, from the Allied south section than from the Axis north section, simply because you have more choke points here and here. Perhaps a good place for a building for a forward HQ is actually the fuel point down here, because it's a lot easier to hold. You got a heavy cover right there early in the game, and you can attack from a wide range of areas. And putting a machine gun in this house does you pretty good, but it's still open to attack. So that's the end of Semois. Let's jump into Sturzdorf. And as you were saying, there are some balance issues with, at least I think there's some balance issues with the layout of the resources on this map. Specifically, the high munition point on the Axis side is entirely too vulnerable, and we'll take a look at that in just a moment. But I really like the sort of asymmetrical layout of fuel that still manages to be balanced, but certainly the high munitions point is very, very annoying, and we'll talk about that in just a second. What are your main thoughts about balance aside from the munitions point?
Well, one thing to note just before we move on is that if you do get a forward HQ on any map, you're automatically one unit down from your opponent. So certainly it's a trade-off. As far as Sturzdorf goes, I played on it, the first week on the show and did about 5 matches, and it just didn't matter how much harassment I did. Allies will always have more munitions because of that plus 16 munitions, the high point.
Let's show that right now, and then you can talk about it, because they have a plus 16 right here, literally like a hop, skip, and a jump away from their base, and the only thing is there's a tiny strategic point right next to it that you could maybe go down and harass, but it's so close to their base they could easily, whatever they're building could come and stop you. So that's their high munition point. Let's look on the tactical map. That's right over here. It's very close to their base. The Axis only have one avenue of approach right here, and if there's any Allied fortifications here, it's very difficult to get to. Meanwhile, on the Axis side, there is no easy 16 munitions point right next to their base. It's way out here. and it's extremely in the open. The Allies have it nice in a convenient corner. You can only attack it from one direction because their base blocks the other one. Over here, let's look at it. This thing is exceedingly exposed. Anybody could come from the middle and attack it. Anybody could come from this road. Anybody could come from the north and attack it. And it's extremely difficult to hold because there's no nice buildings around it to garrison an MG in. I mean, you could put something in the woods there, but it's still, I mean, it's just right out in the open. And look how far it is from your base comparatively. I mean, you've got your base down here, and you have to go all the way up this road, and finally you're at the munitions point. I mean, it's got a big mountain next to it, directly blocking your view, so you can't get to it in the same vein, direct approach. So, I mean, that is my major balance concern on this map, is when you look at the tactical rundown, the high munitions point for the Axis is so much easier to harass, especially if the Allies control the northern or the middle section. If, the Axis go heavy for the left, they're going to lose that munitions point. I mean, that's why I always go for the north on this map as Axis.
One strategy that's pretty popular, I've seen it in a couple of replays, is if you go in the upper right-hand corner by that +10 fuel, and you start building barbed wire along that little ramp that's there, and you drag it all the way down to the other ramp, the bottom of the other ramp, you can pretty much block off Allies early on from getting that +10 fuel, and then if you send your 2nd Pioneer Squad down that road and just build some barbed wire there, that also helps. But it does take a little while to set up, and if they go for the right side of the map first, which usually that's what they do because Axis tends to have to secure that left victory point. I mean, you could argue that Axis has an easier time securing that +10 munitions and +10 fuel and the victory point right by their base, and maybe that's kind of the trade-off for that munitions point. But it's just far too difficult to harass the upper right-hand corner of the map once they get it. And, I mean, you'd think that the map would come down to who controls that +16 fuel, and sometimes it does, but I don't really like maps that are like that anyways. Like Rails and Metal we'll talk about later. There's that +16 fuel in the middle, and whoever controls that wins the game almost every single time. So,
well, it's not even, I mean, that +16 fuel is, I mean, look at the fuel layout. It's assumed to be an an Axis control. I mean, look at it the way, I mean, Axis, right next to their base, they have a +5 here, and they have a +10 here, but that's really, the +10 is in the middle. I mean, it's not a guaranteed Axis grab over near that victory point. So you can't count that +10 fuel on the left-hand side to be an Axis, easy Axis fuel. Whereas, the Axis have this one low fuel point over here and a +16 over here. The Allies have a +5 and a +10 that are very difficult. I mean, they're literally all the way across the map from the Axis to try and harass. That is a long frickin' march for infantry to make. And any one of the routes they could take could be guarded by anything. So, comparatively, there's a quick walk for both of them to get to this left side, and the Axis have a little bit quicker time getting over to this far right-hand side, but that is a major problem because it is assumed to be an Axis control. Otherwise, I don't know how Axis is supposed to, I mean, are Axis assumed to take the 5 and the 10 here, and then the 16 is up for grabs? I mean, the same way that you said, I don't like that there's one point that is up for grabs that is a massive high fuel point. If there's high fuel points, they should be, I mean, I don't even like the idea of high fuel points in general. I think the game techs too fast. But if you're going to put a big fuel point somewhere, make sure you put another one for somebody else, for the other side to grab across the other side. At least they did that much in Angoville, making it much harder to hold both. But, I don't like the idea of high fuel points at all. I wish they could be taken out of the single-player maps.
And even if you get that fuel point as a +16 as Axis, there's that strategic point that basically gets cut off in 10 seconds. And so if you're not paying attention and guarding that right side, it's pretty hard to stop that from happening. Whereas you have to go all the way to the north and to cut off that +10 fuel point,
and the strategic point in the middle. Both of those in order to just cut off a +10.
Oh, really? Is the strategic point connected to that +10 fuel in the north? Do you need that strategic point? Because when I last checked, you didn't. I haven't.
Well, I mean, if you look at the tactical map, I mean, there's the +10 medium munitions point, and just south of that is a strategic point that both look like they connect directly to it. So if they have that strategic point in the middle, not the middle, but I mean like the one north of the victory point in the middle, is looks like it would connect if they have that to their base. So I think you have to take that strategic point and that medium munitions point, and that would be a lot harder than simply cutting off this strategic point, completely denying the Axis of this fuel.
Yeah, one of the weirdest things about the map is that +5 in the right-hand corner. I think you need that strategic point to hold it, and it's just kind of strange. I think it should have a link to the Axis low fuel point. Although there's only one way to access that, and it's through that little bridge right there. There's no like walking point on the bottom, so that little causeway up to the victory point is pretty much a death trap for anyone trying to get up there. At least for Axis trying to get up there. If they want to go another route, they got to go all the way up to the north by that +10 fuel. So I think that favors Allies as well. They got this nice wide open entrance. The map is just horribly imbalanced. Anyone that thinks it isn't unbalanced, I just think hasn't played on it enough. It certainly favors Allies completely and forces you to kind of do weird things as Axis, like try to send 2 pioneers to barbed wire the 10 fuel off immediately, or hardcore control the left and build immediate observation posts on those. So it's just a very strange map, and I talk to a lot of the top players all the time about it, and they pretty much say that there's no way an Allied player can lose on that map to an Axis player if both players are pretty competent. But one of the issues that we should bring up is the fact that outside of the Allied base, those buildings just make for perfect MG, like they're just like murder holes. You can put an MG in there, and you can basically fire on the entire Allied base just from 2 of those buildings. The one that's on the left-hand corner of that long row, and then the one that's by the. It's not the one next to the MG, because the MG will fire on that building, but the one right below it on the left-hand side, you can stick it in there, and that pretty much will effectively cut off the Allies from building units and coming out of their base on that side, at least.
Yeah, that's another small balance issue. I mean, that doesn't happen a whole lot, but so what would you change in this map to make it more friendly to Axis then?
Wow. That's a pretty loaded question. Maybe, so you need a strategic point in between the high munitions points, and that's why there's a strategic point on both sides between the high munitions points. But oh man, maybe put the that +16 on the bottom where that +5 fuel is, and change that +5 the low munitions to a strategic point. That way, it might. I don't know if there's even any way to balance it with the current layout of what the points are right now. I'd like to see what the balance team is going to think about on this one. I tried to explain to Mora, like I said, and he just couldn't give any response back. Really, he's not allowed to. But
I think part of the issue is the base layout. Allies are slid over a little bit and have much easier access to the right-hand side of the map. The Axis, way down deep in the corner. If you switched around the Axis base with the low munitions point and the low fuel point, maybe that would do it.
Yep. I don't know if there's another 1v1 map that doesn't just start out kind of symmetrical as far as starting locations. They're both kind of pretty similar on Semois and Angoville. Semois a little bit different, but yeah, certainly the slid over base, the more in the center you are, the better I think it is for you as well. So that might be a way to fix it, would be just to move the Allies to the left and try to. But then if you move them to the left and put that, where are you going to put the +16 munitions point? On the right, and then it's going to be even harder to harass. Not like there was an option before, but oh boy, I don't know. This map's just really, really, really bad for me. I just don't like it. I won't even play on it at all.
It looks like we're not going to have enough time to do all these maps. I think we're going to have to break this up into 2, which is actually kind of cool, because we have good discussions on all the maps. So we're actually going to do maybe 2 more maps here, and then we'll move on to the unit of the week. And next week we'll continue this series and do map rundowns 2, and do the rest of the maps. So we'll do half today and half next week, I believe, and that should be good. So small change in the program there. Sorry about that, guys. But I did not know how long. I should have thought about this before. So we are moving on to whichever one I just clicked. What's next in the thing? I'm looking at the loading screen. And
Lorraine.
Yes, Lorraine. Right. I don't recognize that loading screen because I suck, and I guess I haven't played Lorraine enough. All right, I gotta get on with you guys more in the evenings and start playing Lorraine, because I don't recognize the loading screen now. So Lorraine, we talked about a lot in the past. Let's talk first. Early in the game, this building in the middle is #1 priority for both sides, because it overlooks the victory point and the crossroads, which basically everything in the map. I mean, you look up this road and you see a church that guards the Axis approach to the North Victory Point. You look down that road and you see the access to the South Victory Point, and the South Point's over there. So this road basically connects. It's a crossroad from north-south and from base to base. So, very, very important section of the map to control right here in the middle. And that's really kind of a cool aspect of this map. That's one of the things I really like about it, is there's a lot of action for that middle victory point, and that's really cool. There's a plus 10 munitions point right next to it on both sides. One is, I guess, supposed to be the easier for the Allies to get, but then there's plus 5s opposite those, and, it's really, really well designed, I think. I really like it. The Allies, of course, have a lot easier time in the south. The Axis have a lot easier time in the north, but that, you can still harass and attack from the middle is much easier on both sides if you attack the north or the south from the middle, so controlling the middle is very important. I don't really have much more to say about this map that hasn't already been said. I mean, it's a great map. I don't have any balance problems with it.
Yeah, I certainly don't have any balance problems. I just don't tend to like maps that favor one point, and that's kind of like the all-holding point. But it does encourage you to fight over that one point. And
well, I don't think it's as important as, say, like Rails and Metal, which we'll probably talk about in a minute. It's because in Rails and Metal, we're talking about a single point that is a resource point. And so if you control that plus 16 fuel, you have a huge advantage. But if you just control the middle, your advantage isn't resource. It's not like it's impossible to come back from. Your advantage is positional. It's much easier for you to attack another point, and you also get the addition of the victory point. So, I mean, controlling the middle doesn't give you supreme resource advantage over your opponent. It just gives you positional advantage, which is easily taken away and is not as super powerful as a plus 16 versus your opponent not having it.
Right, the plus 16 is definitely more of an issue, but if you do control the center as allies, you can push on that plus 5 fuel to the left and that 10 munitions point pretty easily. And if you can control it as Axis, it's not quite as beneficial.
That's true.
It allows you to hold those 2 points a lot easier, and then maybe even encroach upon the allies' low fuel point to the right. But it is crucial to control that. I mean, send one of your teammates, the one that's closer to the center of the map, should send their first Pioneer Engineer. I played a couple games where both teams knew that, and we both sent our starting Pioneer and Engineer there, and actually the Allies will beat the Axis by about 1 second, depending on how much lollygagging your Engineer squad decides to make on its walk over there.
Well, I don't think the plus 10 munitions is a big deal as far as Allies controlling, because if you look at it, the way I see it is there's 4 plus 10 munitions points in the middle of the map. You have that one just south of the victory point. You have another one next to the Allied base, and I would contend that those two are both Allied favored, whereas the northern two are Axis favored. So, and I think the fuel point is fairly easy to hold for the Axis because they have another road right up here that allows them to get to it. It's pretty difficult, but I think having control of the middle doesn't give you a super advantage, but it is very desirable because that's an attack position from which to launch at the enemy's north or south points. And I think that's what makes this map great.
Right, and we both agree it's pretty balanced, so it's a great 2v2 map. I played on it probably 30 or 40 games. I really enjoy it.
All right, we can go on. We'll do Mcgechean's War and Point du Hoc tonight, and then we'll do the rest next week. So Mcgechean's War is another map from the beta, and it's very, I think I really like it. And we can look at the layout here. I like the way that it's set up so that the left-hand side is bigger and is more important but harder to hold and things like this, and the right-hand side is like the graveyard area is sort of less important, doesn't have as much resources and such, but it's still very important. And the middle, of course, is similar to Lorraine, very difficult to excuse me, very important to hold as well because it allows you to attack either side from it. And we'll open this up in just a moment, and we'll see what we see. I mean, I haven't played it actually a whole lot in the retail. In fact, I don't think I've played it at all in the retail because everybody's been playing, I don't want to play Mcgechean's War. We play that all the time. Rah, rah, rah. So let's take a look at the tactical map, and I'll explain my outlook on this map. As the Allies or the Axis, the main theater of operations is the left-hand side of the map, and I'll explain why. On the right-hand side, you have a 5 munitions point and a 5 fuel point and a 5 fuel point clustered over in this corner. So whoever controls the right-hand side is probably going to control both of those. Or at the very least, if you're allies, you might still control this munitions point due to harassing. But if you control the right side, you'll probably get plus 10 fuel. And you'll probably get, well, not much. I mean, that's it. There's no munitions over here or anything. It's just a plus 5 fuels. However, the left-hand side of this map, all of this stuff over here, you get 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, so let's just not assume this one's probably allied controlled. So 1, 2, 3 munitions points up for grabs that are all plus 10. So 30 munitions, another plus 5 here, 35 munitions, and 20 fuel are up for grabs versus 10 fuel on the right. I almost always want to get the left-hand side of this map and hold it, because if you can get these 2 munitions and this medium, and just take the other guy's munitions medium fuel point there, just cut off their fuel a little bit, you are hurting them big time, because that plus 10 fuel is very important. It'll be a big turner if you have plus 20 and they don't have it on the left hand side. Then they will have, for example, plus 15 total if they hold these other fuel points, and you hold 10, 10, and then your 5 over here. Yeah, it's 25 versus 15. It's going to be a pretty big difference, I think. But that's my view of it. I like a lot of the middle is very well designed. I think there's a lot of really good fighting that goes on in the middle as well. And the way that you have the hedgerow fighting and snipers and things like that. And a lot of engineers with flamethrowers coming on this map, just because there's, the buildings watching the very important points. And so that's what I have to say about it. What do you think about Mcgechean's War?
Well, I play this map almost exclusively in the beta, just over and over and over again between my friends and random people. I think it's definitely a great rifle spam map for allies, especially if you get early grenades after you get 2 or 3 squads of riflemen. I think the left side favors Axis a little bit. One guy can spam Volks, the other guy can get quick MGs in those 2 buildings, one by the plus 10 fuel and one by the plus 5 munitions. And that, in effect, for the first few minutes of the game, just locks down those 2 points, and you can push forward from that. So if Axis just ignores the right and cap the 2 plus 5 munitions points right outside their base on the right, and then does a double push for the left, I think it might be a little bit easier for the Axis to access the left side of the map, especially if they're doubling over there, than it would be for the Allies to double over there. The map tends to kind of get a little polarized at times, with the Axis controlling the north and the Allies controlling the south, but it's really important to have maneuverability. Once the game techs up to Tier 3, I really think it favors Axis because of the long hedgerows, which makes for perfect long firing lanes to keep on shooting and retreating your Pumas, over and over again, and then
not to mention Stugs, much harder to flank when you're going down long roadways.
Exactly, and I mean, Tier 3 abuse is bad on any map, as Cepha likes to say in one of our conversations, but on this map I think it's especially bad. So the best thing to do as allies is double rifle spam, in my opinion. It's not a good weapon support center map, especially on the left-hand side, because there's just there's too many avenues for you to get flanked, or for someone to just ignore your MG altogether. You need that maneuverability and early grenades, I think, in order to get rid of Axis out of those buildings, because they will get to those 2 buildings before you will, even if you just send your first MG over there immediately. So you can have some great games on this, but still, I think Puma and Stug on this particular map is really, really good. If both players do that, it's probably almost a guaranteed win if the game goes on longer than 10 minutes. It's really hard to counter on this map.
What do you think, then, should be changed, if anything should be changed on this particular map, as far as resource layout, or should there be like buildings for the Allied side on that plus 10? Maybe you should move the 2 buildings that are on the plus 5 over to the plus 10 field.
That would definitely be interesting, but I think Axis would be able to probably garrison that early. They'd probably send out their second Pioneer straight for that point, and then it would be more of a run to that building. Otherwise, you lose your fuel. So I think they balanced it pretty well. Early rifle spam can really take great map control on this, especially, like I said, with early grenades. So you have to win this in the first 10 minutes otherwise, and get good map control. At least I mean, what the Allies should be doing on the left side is trying to take that +10 fuel from Axis while they capture everything else. Axis can move down from the middle road and take the +5 fuel and the +10 fuel pretty easily from the Allies while they're doing that, but it's really a fight over that medium fuel right by that building. I think it's still pretty balanced. I mean, Allies probably have an advantage early game, and they need to solidify that advantage. Now, Point du Hoc, as we'll probably talk about next, I think that's the next map on the list. That certainly favors Allies, but this map is pretty balanced, and that's, I think, why they had it in the beta. It just shows off a lot of different strategies and things like that you can use, but still Tier 3 is the best. I wouldn't change anything. That's the way that this map just works. That's the benefit of it. Certain maps have different strategies, and that's one of the main strategies you should probably use on it. So I think it's great, though. But just don't go Weapon Support Center on this map, really. Like Point du Hoc, it's okay, but like I said, it's just too easy to go around that one MG that's just sitting around covering like 1 point, if even that.
The argument to your idea that Tier 3 Axis is overpowered on that map would be, consider the long firing lanes and the advantage that AT guns with armor-piercing rounds would give you on that map against Puma or Stug Spam. I mean, I think it would be a lot easier to control the left as Allies if you go airborne and drop a lot of AT guns to control those roadways. I mean, just two looking down the same roadway, I mean, there'd be no way to flank it without driving straight at it and getting shot the entire time with double AP rounds. Your Stug is gone, you know? So I think that would be a big thing. Plus, consider that tank traps are certainly in wider use now than they were in the beta, perhaps, and maybe are a lot easier way to help stop that Puma spam. If you take control of the left as Allies, drop down some tank traps, and shit, I mean, what is the Axis going to do? They can't take it down. The Panthers don't do it. The Goliaths don't do it. You just have to sit there shooting at the dang thing, giving your opponent, like, the heads up. Hey, I'm going to attack over here now, you know, in 3 minutes when I bust through your tank trap wall, and when you get through, they've built another one, you know, just out of sight range, and you're like, gah! Anyway. So I think it's balanced in that vein. We'll see if there's any major problems with it, but I don't think there is. Going on to Point du Hoc. I have a major problem with this map. Major problem. Let's look at the layout of the fuel. There's a +16 next to each base. You have the Allied one right here and the Axis one right here. But let's examine. The Axis one is approachable by one route, but it's an entirely open route. And you could easily go back there and mess with them, and the only way that they could get to you, I believe, is way over here. I mean, they have to go from their base all the way over here in order to prevent you from getting that high fuel, from lowering it down. However, look where the Allied high fuel is. I mean, it's in between their bases, way in the opposite corner. There's like almost no way to get there and retreat, because the only avenues of escape are basically blocked by the Allies here and over here. So if you try to take that 16 fuel and then escape, I mean, you'd never make it. That's a major issue with the game, because this 16 fuel is unharassable, I consider it, by the Axis and the far right-hand side. Whereas the far left-hand side, the 16 fuel that the Axis hold, is much more harassable by the Allies. The other thing to consider is it seems to be that this southern point here, with the victory point and the high munitions point and the high fuel point, seems to be much more accessible to the Allied player than the Axis player. I mean, just looking at the distances, the Allied player goes over here, down, and he's right there. And the Axis player has to go, you know, a little bit longer. You know, there's a big, you know, question of whether or not, you know, controlling this high fuel point is important, or this high munitions point is important, but you know, I guess the rest of the map is sort of shifted to the left-hand side, so it's a little bit easier for the Axis, but I don't know.
There's also a question of supply line. It's only 2 jumps away from the Allies. That point that's right below their base, the 10 munitions point, you can walk to the left of that, actually. It doesn't look like you can do it, but right where those boats are, you can actually walk around that little corner and then work your way on to that strategic point. If Axis controls that strategic point right by the victory point in the north like they usually do, and then they control that munitions point that's kind of at the bottom of that, then it's 2 points away from them. But if they don't control that for some reason, or they lose control of the high munitions point early, then it's like 4 or 5 points away, or minimum of
Which one are you
3,
talking
looks
about?
like.
Which is 4 or 5 points away? The fuel point at the
the
bottom?
16 fuel. Yeah, the 16 fuel.
Okay.
So it is, I think, harder for the Axis to do it, but if they can get an early MG in those bunkers, that's probably the way that they can guarantee themselves the fuel. And Allies, on this map, I don't think it's such a bad idea to go Weapon Support Center if you're the northern player. What I like to do is send my 2nd Engineer Squad into that building that's right outside the Axis base, and stick an MG in there, then get a sniper to back it up. And meanwhile, you're capping the other points in the south, and then you get a mortar and you start shelling their base basically from there. And if they focus too much on that building, rather than trying to double team your other ally who's just rifle spamming in the south, then it's a good distraction. I mean, people getting their base shelled at the 5-minute mark don't exactly appreciate it. So don't build your Wehrmacht quarters so close to that road, so close to the road, so close to that stone wall on this map. It's better just to build it right below your HQ, maybe even back a little bit to the left, because allies can get an early mortar and just start shelling your base, which is going to cause you a lot of trouble. But other than that little fuel problem that this map has, it's really fun. It's great for armor car rushing as allies, especially because there's a lot of munitions with that plus 16 munitions point, and the plus 10 being, and another plus 10, and another plus 10 being right by the allied base. So you can get some early armored cars while your allies fast teching to Shermans to back you up and just drop mines all over their bases. Once you're done with the guy in the north, you drop 2 mines, go to the guy in the south and do the same thing. So it's a really interesting thing. But if you run an armored car right by that building by the Allies base, every time he'll run into, because of the pathing, he'll run into that little hut thing that's right below it and slow down to a crawl going over like the little hill that comes from that. So you might want to micro around that, but if you just set the rally point in their base, it's going to run over that every time. I beat pretty good players doing that. So you
Which
can
one
get
are you
out a
talking
really
about?
Quick armored car. The building in the north, right by the Axis base, that little hut thing that's right below it, I don't know, for whatever you call it. You see that little overhang?
Oh yeah. Okay, like a little
If you-
stable thing. I got you.
Yeah, it'll go right over that. It'll turn into like a little mound, and it'll slow down to a crawl for about 20 seconds to go over that. So,
Pathing is
so the
terrible.
pathing's really bad at that point.
So we
but,
talked about the fuel imbalance. Let's look at the munitions imbalance here. Okay, so next to the Allied base, easily defendable, we have 10, 16, another 10, another 10. So we've got 30 plus 16, we've got 46 easily defendable munitions. I mean, right next to the Allied base, directly connected to an Allied base, except for this one, which is right between them. On the Allied side, we have a plus 5, a plus 16, and another plus 5 and a plus 10. So we've got,
on the Axis
15.
side.
Yeah, on the Axis side. Sorry, on the Axis side, we got 15, we got 16, and we got 5. That's it. So, I mean, you've got, 10 less munitions easily accessible by the Axis, I think. I mean, maybe you could argue that this one's more accessible by the Axis, but, it's only an extra plus 5. It's way out there. I mean, that's the thing. I think maybe this point behind the Allied base, I mean, you've got a plus 16 and plus 10 right behind the Allied base. There's no comparative thing over here. You have the plus 16 and the plus 10 over here, right next to the Axis base, but it's much more harassable. So you've got those comparisons. But why is this 10 and this 10 like right next to the Allied base, and there's nothing comparable over here? There's 2 plus 5s, and there's another plus 5, but there's no plus 10s in the middle of the map for the Axis. I mean, that's just kind of a weird imbalance to me.
Yeah, it's definitely imbalanced for allies. I didn't even notice the munitions imbalance until you just pointed it out right now, but you get an endless supply of dropped mines in their base. Every minute or every cooldown, you got enough saved up by the time you get your first armored car in there to just drop unlimited amounts of munitions, and it pretty much will win the game for you every time unless they tech up to a Krieg barracks, because usually they probably won't have their Sturm armory out yet, and you can just keep on dropping mines and harassing them. And I've never done it with 2 allied players doing it. I think that's kind of risky. But definitely that's kind of the strategy to use, in my opinion, on this map.
All right, well, let's move on then. We will continue the map rundowns next week, and we have something very exciting coming for you in the future. We're going to have a big balance roundtable discussion, big panel coming up in November is the tentative date, and we're hoping to get somebody from Relic on here to talk with us about the balance. Maybe we'll have a patch in between then, so we'll have something really cool to talk about. Just stay tuned for that. It's going to be awesome. We're gonna when I have finalized all the details, I'll let you guys know on the website tails.tsncentral.com, and I will also post about it. Saying suggestions for questions or issues or balance things you wanted to mention. So we'll take into account a lot of the balance issues that we talked about today. So map balance issues will certainly be one of the topics that we talk about. But for now, we need to move on to our next segment, which means we need a quick commercial break. We'll be right back after this quick word from our sponsor.
Hello, welcome to League Game On's 420 Hackers Vault, where we unlock the power of little fluffy clouds and put you in the game. How may I disconnect you?
I'd like a dedicated game server where I can choose my own games, and, I can have it private or public, and as many players as I want.
With the other server hosting companies out there, you play one game and you pay for all the rest. At Insomnia 365, you pay for one server and you have all the games you need. Oh yeah! With Insomnia 365's Cortex, you have the ultimate game server control panel, allowing you to run more than one game server. You can manage your server's full setup, public, private, and as many player slots as you want. The other game server companies run one server and you pay for all the rest. Or Insomnia 365, pay for one server, get all the most popular multiplayer games. Oh yeah! www.insomnia365.com.
TSN, your source. After careful consideration, we've decided to simplify this whole sounder process and just go with TSN. We're better than you are.
Yes, welcome back to the Team Sportscast Network. It is Tales of Legend here. Sunday nights is where you'll catch us, and it is Company of Heroes time, basically. If you don't know what the show is about, we're basically a community show for Company of Heroes. The website is tales.tsncentral.com. On to segment number 3. We are discussing machine guns in this week's Unit of the Week, and well, I had some interesting things. We went through some tests on this one as well, and we have some statistics to report to you based on the information we have. Let's first talk about the differences. Let's talk about overall machine gun use, because the Axis get it a lot sooner than the Allies. So overall machine gun use, though, is how you use machine guns, period. A lot of the times, they're very good to garrison, and a lot of people, a lot of newbies, will just garrison their machine guns in what looks like great positions, but they don't understand sometimes that buildings do not have windows on all sides, and the machine gun can only fire out a window if there's a window there. It can't shoot out the side of a building where there is no window. So it's very important to use your Alt button and circle around a building, if you are considering to put an MG in there, and just sort of get to know which buildings in the game are really good and have, windows on all sides. The church in Semois is a good example. The building across from that is a good example. The next building next to it is a good example as well. They all have windows on all sides. However, the building closest to the Axis bridge on Semois is an example of a building where there is only windows on two sides. If you are on the shortest sides, you won't get shot at, and you can fire back and kill a machine gunner in that building. So it's very important when placing your machine gun inside of a building, know where the windows are and what avenues of attack it is guarding. Also know, if you plant your machine gun in a building and an enemy is very close by when you do it, he can circle strafe your building. He can run around in circles around your building, firing his weapon, just like very, very close. Just run circles around the building, and your machine gunner will constantly try and switch windows. He will not be able to kill them. They will eventually kill him over time, and he will do no damage because he cannot suppress them, because he can't catch them. He'll switch to one window, and he'll be like, oh, they're on the other side of the building. And he'll go to that side, and by the time he sets up, he's like, oh, they're on the other side of the building. And he continually switches back and forth. So that is something definitely to watch out for when you're placing machine guns, and a great strategy to use against machine guns. If you see one going for a building, rush it. with engineers, riflemen, any kind of infantry that can fire on the move. Infantry or riflemen, basically, infantry or engineers, pioneers is what you want to use. And just have them just circle around the building, just hold down your shift button and right-click in a circle around the building like 300 times, and you'll eventually have killed them, unless they get out and retreat. So that is a great way to do it if you are racing a machine gunner to a building and you can't get there first. That's what you do. Also, other considerations to when you're placing a machine gunner, I would suggest that if you treat this machine gunner sort of like a sniper, you're going to have a lot better job. And this is what I mean. Placing a machine gunner in a building is all well and good, especially if that building is covering a choke point, for example, or, a great position. Take the northmost building on Angoville, for example, is a really great position to put a machine gunner. But it is only really great the first time it fires, because the first time it fires, you're going to catch the enemy off guard, and he's going to run in and get suppressed and have to retreat. However, he's not going to go there again until he has some means of destroying that machine gun. So you can use that to your advantage. When you put a machine gunner in a building or any position, you can wait until he suppresses the first group that tries to get through and forces the enemy to retreat. The enemy now thinks you have a machine gun in that position. Now, you can remove that machine gunner from that position and put him anywhere else on the map. Use him in a different position. Use him with an attack or put him somewhere else. And the fact that he was there will keep your opponent from going to that place, the old choke point, up until he has the means to destroy a machine gunner. So until he gets engineers with flamethrowers, a sniper, or an armored car. And so in that case, you can pretty much be secure that it's going to take him a while to get there, and you use your machine gunner somewhere else. A machine gunner sitting in a building defending an area that never gets attacked is a waste of resources. Always try and remember that. Now, for example, many times you'll lose a machine gunner very quickly because by the time, once somebody knows where it is, they will only come back when they have a sniper, and they won't fall for it again. So a machine gunner is pretty much ineffective unless it is in a new location. Unless a machine gunner is in a different location, it is ineffective once the enemy know where it is, because he will simply not run into the machine gunner's arc of fire. He's going to flank it, he's going to go somewhere else, he's going to bring a mortar team or a sniper and drop some stuff on it. So every time your machine gunner suppresses a unit and kills them, or forces them to retreat, pick him up, pack him up, move him somewhere else that guards the same choke point. Just move him, separate him, bring him to a tree, bring him somewhere else, bring him back from the field if you need to guard a different section of it. Anything that will surprise the enemy and force him to have to run into your suppression again. So that's my major spiel about how to use machine gunners effectively. That's my tips of the day, I guess. Vittensby, anything to add as far as machine gunner use, regardless of side?
Deploy your machine gun constantly. Just keep your opponent guessing about where they are, and if you keep on redeploying it, sometimes they think you got like 5 of those suckers somewhere because they keep on running into them when it's just 1 or 2 keep continuously moving around. So it keeps your opponent in check and keeps them guessing about where's the location and how to counter it. Also, if you have 2 machine gunners kind of close by to each other, you can do and that's all you have. You can use one to cover the other one's approach, so you kind of do a leapfrog. One's deployed, the other one walks forward. One's deployed, the other one walks forward. So that's an interesting little tactic you can use. As far as the strafing, it works most of the time, but if your riflemen start to kind of lollygag a little bit, as they sometimes do, they do get that machine gun up in the direction of fire towards them. So it doesn't always work, but certainly you'll probably kill at least one of the guys in the machine gun squad. I think it's a bug, but on the Sturzdorf map, in those 4 or 5 buildings, that row of buildings right outside the Allied base, if you stick it in the one to the far left, you can actually shoot from the wall, and there's no window or anything, shoot from the wall down towards the left of that. So, and you see this I took a screenshot of it actually. You see this little machine gun coming out of the wall, just straight out of the wall, no window, nothing like that, and it'll fire from that direction. So that might need to be looked at as well on that particular map. It's kind of minor, and I don't know why that would be if buildings all have the same type of code and whatever goes into it, but it's certainly on that particular building you can fire out of that wall. Maybe they just coded in some type of window or something and it wasn't put there. I don't know. Certainly the Axis machine guns are a little bit better than the Allies just because of their range. And, just redeploy your machine guns. Keep your opponent guessing. That's the best thing you can do with them.
Now, what is your opinion on putting machine gunners in behind sandbags? Is it worth building sandbags for machine gunners to be behind?
Not on any map that I've seen. There's always a tree nearby that you can stick it in heavy cover or orange cover, and pretty much you don't really need to build sandbags. And then the problem with building sandbags is that if you stick them behind the sandbags and your machine gunner gets killed, then you just gave your opponent a free place to put a squad. Plus, it kind of wastes a little bit of time.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest problem with sandbags is that actually, this is something I never thought about. Can you delete your own sandbags when they're in the fog of war?
Probably.
I mean, because that would be really freaking weird. I mean, I've discussed this in the forums a lot. I think deleting your own defenses is really stupid that you can do that. You can just magically, I'm going to box my entire, base in with tank traps, but then whenever I need to leave, I'll just delete one of them or something like that. Or I'll block off, my bridge on Semois to keep the enemy from tank rushing me, but whenever I need to go through there, I'll just delete it. I don't have to, blow it up or dismantle it or anything. I think it would just, all they have to do is, instead of being able to delete them, just allow your engineers to dismantle them. I think that should be something that's in the game, because that would give both sides the ability to get through tank traps or sandbags or whatever. Barbed wire should still need a research. I think that's a cool thing. But I think you should be able to dismantle sandbags or tank traps twice as long as it takes to build them. I think maybe that's a good time.
I definitely agree on that. If someone makes a mistake, they can always just deconstruct it really quickly. And someone suggested that they should add a jump over sandbag type graphic to rifleman units.
I think that was me, actually. I made a big post on it. I've been a big stink on it on relicnews.com. I said that was the topic of my thread. I said we need a new thing, because I don't like the fact that that sandbags work just as effectively, actually more effectively than barbed wire, because they don't allow you to get through even if you have the pliers or whatever. So yes. Back to machine gunners though. I think how do we get talking from machine gunners to defenses? Oh, right, sandbags. Yeah. So I think in the current build though, I think it would be wise, if you want to give your guys some heavy cover with sandbags, and if you lose it, just delete your sandbags. You could be assaulting the enemy position. He's got all his Volks behind your sandbag that you left there, and then it just disappears. Goodbye, heavy cover. It's magically erasing itself, flying off into the wind. That would be interesting to see in a replay. So yeah. Anyways, I think if you have the time, if you just got an engineer sitting around, I think it's cool to put them in heavy cover. That's just going to help you a little bit out, especially if they start rolling in with a tank. It'll give your guys a little bit more cover when they're trying to retreat, or if they roll in from multiple sides while you're trying to avoid taking damage. That sort of thing. That's kind of a cool thing, but I don't think it's a big priority. Like you said, light cover is certainly enough for machine gunners usually, especially considering they don't stand and fire toe-to-toe with an enemy a lot. They usually suppress them and force them to retreat. I mean, it's not we better be in heavy cover or else we might lose this engagement. That doesn't happen unless they're against the tank, and they're never going to win anyway. So that's the main uses of machine guns. How to defeat them, we talked about. If they're in a building and you're close by and you can get it before they set up, you can circumstrafe. Other easy ways to take out machine gunners is if you're, for example, rifle spamming, send one rifle group against a machine gunner on one side and just have the other one go along around the outside, so completely flanking him, and throw a grenade. I mean, very easy, very quick to do. Flamers, engineer flamers also work if it's out in the open, or as well as if it's in a building. The thing about it is, if there's a machine gun in a building, you have to watch out for somebody paying attention, because if they pay attention, they can reorient their machine gun to fire at whatever target you're trying to get in close. So if they are paying attention and they see, you sending in the distraction squad, and they see the flame engineer squad coming in from the other side, and they're quick about it, they might be able to move the machine gunner to the other side of the building and suppress your engineers before they get close enough. That's if they're really quick about it, and if they're, or even if they're, looking along the same side, if they don't have to remove. But, most of the time it works if you send a distraction squad to get pinned to draw the fire, and then throw in another squad to either throw grenades or have flamers and engineers. That's a very effective tactic. And of course, the last one, if you're too bored, if you're too annoyed by it, just I don't really want to do all this micro. Let's just build an armored car, or let's just build a mortar, because those are both also effective means of getting rid of the machine gunner. Oh, I'm sorry, snipers are also a very easy means of getting rid of snipers in a building or anywhere. I mean, just as soon as you snipe it, it takes about 3 or 4 seconds for the next guy to get on the gun, and another 2 snipes and he's dead. So I mean, you get 20 seconds worth of shots, or probably less than that, 15 seconds worth of shots, and you get a dead machine gun squad. So as soon as that happens, he's going to make a beeline for your sniper, or he's going to have to retreat that machine gun squad. So that's another obviously great tactic to use against machine gunners.
The way you do that tactic is you click on the building and you select the squad within the building. You have to select the squad, click on it,
right,
and then you can click on the unit that you want it to target, and it'll retarget it pretty much on the next burst. What else was I going to say about machine guns? Oh yeah, try to predict when the allies are getting close enough to throw a grenade, because they'll still be suppressed. Sometimes you suppress the unit and then they crawl slowly up. Usually, once they get suppressed, it's a good idea to redeploy if they got close enough, because sometimes you can come from the same direction, and if you time it right, you can get around their burst shot and get just a little bit closer, maybe close enough to throw a grenade. So try to predict that. I played a guy today that was able to do that pretty effectively. Also, if a machine gun team is killed, don't forget to recrew it. You don't want to recrew it with pioneers or engineers, because it costs about 100 or 80 more manpower, depending on which side you are, to crew it with that. It's better just to do it with Volks or Riflemen. That's the cheapest way to do it, and then reinforce your squad. There's currently a bug where if you pick up a MG and you try to reinforce it at your HQ, you can't do it for some reason. You just can't. That's the only time that you can't reinforce the
Also,
squad.
don't pick up machine guns with stormtroopers. It's bugged. I'm sorry, not machine guns. But they work with machine guns. AT guns. My bad.
It actually
dropped the ball.
I think it's all units. In the beta, just a funny thing about AT guns, I actually was retreating my AT gun back to the base. The crew got killed, and the AT gun basically walked itself.
It's like the story of the World War II fighter pilot in Japan. He comes back, as his spirit returns to base to get debriefed, because even after he died, he's that committed to the army or whatever. That's interesting. So let's move on to the differences then between the Allied and Axis MGs. There's a couple of main differences. As we mentioned, the range of the Allied machine gun is 40 meters range, versus the Axis machine gun is 45. So it's got an extra 5 meters on it, which is a very important distinction, because a lot of the times, if you get more range, you can pin them sooner, and they're not close enough to throw grenades, or, you pin them farther out and it allows your units to do more damage. There's a lot of advantages to having more range, but also that if you are having your machine gun team is fighting an enemy machine gun team, you can sit just out of their range and blow them to pieces. So if you're the Axis anyway. The other... Sorry, go ahead.
Do they have the same line of sight, both of the machine guns?
I believe so, actually. I'm going to look at that right now. Visual range 35 meters.
Oh, I see. So they would get an advantage with a bike or some unit further ahead.
MG42 is 35. Where is the machine gun squad?
Well, while you're finding that, on the building, there's the buildings on the right in Angoville, and there's that building by the strategic point of the Axis, and then there's a building just slightly north of it. If you put an Allied MG in that building that's just slightly north of it, and then you put an Axis MG in the building to the south of it, without any additional line of sight, both can see each other just fine, but the Axis MG will shoot at that building without getting fired upon back. So that building, don't just think that it's going to be able to hold off an MG in the other building. You will not be able to fire back as allies.
Yep, they both have the same visual range, it says, according to these stats on Nemesis Chicken's site. So that's pretty interesting. But here's the differences, the main differences between the two sides. Axis costs about 20 manpower more, which is interesting because I think the Allied machine gun is better overall, but we'll talk about that in a sec. So let's talk about the differences. Axis is 20 manpower more. It has slightly longer range, as we just mentioned, 45 compared to 40, and it seems to suppress slightly faster, just a little bit faster. It takes about, literally instantaneously suppresses a squad running into its, the first burst pretty much suppresses the squad of riflemen, and it takes about 16 seconds to pin them once they're suppressed. Actually 14 seconds to pin them once they're suppressed, 16 seconds total. And then the Allied one takes about 3 seconds to suppress. It takes a little bit longer, and the Axis, the Allied pin is just about the same time. So it's not that big of a difference as far as suppression goes. It might be a minor difference as far as suppression goes. So the Axis main advantage is its range. That's it. It does not really have any damage advantage. It doesn't have any. Actually has an accuracy penalty compared to the Allied machine gun. So the Axis seems to be pretty inferior in my expense. The only advantage it has is range. It's higher cost, lower accuracy, has no special abilities. So let's look at the actual accuracy numbers here. The Allied machine gun has 20% accuracy at long range, 40% at medium, and 75% at close. So you've got 20, 40, 75 versus 15, 30, 60. So about 5, 10, 15% accuracy penalty. At those different various ranges. 5 at long, 10 at medium, and 15 at close. So certainly the Allied machine gun seems superior in almost every respect, except you have to consider that the Allied machine gun is much harder to get because it comes out of a different building. And so if you want to use it with your riflemen, you have to get both buildings. So certainly that is something to take into consideration. The other thing, of course, is Allies have the armor-piercing rounds that they use in their machine guns, which is really great because it takes out half-tracks in like 2 or 3 bursts, and it takes out armored cars pretty quickly. So usually you're not going to take it out by itself. But if you already have a weakened armored car or a weakened half-track because it got hit by a sticky gun or sticky bomb or whatever, then, the machine gun's going to be able to finish it off, or going to do enough damage to it so that a sticky will take it in one shot. So don't underestimate the armor-piercing rounds. Those are really useful.
Right, the AP rounds will take a Puma down to about 1/10 health. It does take 2 bursts, but if it is slightly damaged by 1 M8 shot or 2 M8 shots, something like that, it'll take it down. AP rounds don't do anything against tanks, so don't even waste your munitions on that. I'm sure some newer players probably don't know that. The AP rounds are great. If Axis had it, then wow, Allies would really lose every time, just because there would be no hope for the motor pool units. But I think AP rounds are a nice addition to the Allied force. Are they essential? Probably not essential per se, but if you do go to the Weapons Support Center opening, you're probably going to have an extended life on those machine guns after the Axis gets out armor. Early armored cars and such.
All right, so I think that's about it. We're going to move on to the match of the week, Cefa versus Fujix on Lyon, and see how that pans out. So I guess at this point I'll have to thank everybody for listening to the audio broadcast here, as well as if you're watching the video. Check out the website, www.tsncentral.com, and, we're pretty much done here. So have a good night. And don't forget, this broadcast is copyrighted 2006 by the Team Sportscast Network. Any copying, reproduction, redistribution, or modification in any manner is expressly prohibited without the written permission of the Team Sportscast Network, LLC. Thank you guys for listening, and have a good night. Stay tuned if you're listening live for the match coming up in just a few minutes.
TSN, the Team Sportscast Network.
This broadcast is copyrighted 2006 by the Team Sportscast Network. Any copying, reproduction, redistribution, modification, rebroadcasting of any kind or any manner is expressly prohibited without the written permission of the Team Sportscast Network, LLC.